Welcome to Saturday's Warrior, the channel where we talk all things BYU, Big 12, and of course, realignment, which is what we'll be talking about tonight. We'll be doing a little segment. Previously, we've been doing a segment called the ACC Spotlight, where we brought on guests from across the ACC to get their perspectives on realignment and how it's impacting their school and how they want to see things play out. And now with the latest news that's going on with the Pac-12, we wanted to do the same thing, go around and talk to folks, get their perspective. And so tonight, to give us the Boise State perspective, we have Bronco Bleymair of the same name, the YouTube channel. You can find him on Twitter, everywhere. And he does some really great content, Boise State focused. And if you're interested in Boise State at all, go check him out. But Bronco Bleymair, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Yeah, this is going to be awesome. Thanks for having me on, man. Yeah, it's a good intro there. Like I said, the YouTube channel, Bronco Bleymair, and the Twitter, I just keep it simple. It's all the same stuff across the board. So, yeah, like you said, if you're interested in Boise State football, Pac-12 football now, I guess, since we're in the Pac-12, and we're going to talk about that. So if you're interested in Pac-12 football realignment discussions, I'm still going to keep an eye on the Mountain West. And then anything breaking news, I'll usually do a video on that as well. So general college football, Boise State, Pac-12, Mountain West, West Coast, I'm there for it. So yeah, if you're interested in that, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you subscribe to Saturday Warrior here. I've been on his channel a couple of times before, so this is not a first time thing. He does great stuff, and it's great to have this conversation.
Yes, you have, and I really appreciate you coming back and to give perspective right now, because this is huge news. What is going on with the Pac? So, Boise State, as everyone knows, along with a few other schools, and we'll get to all that, have been accepted to the Pac-12. Now, it's a little bit different looking than I think you had originally hoped when that invitation would come. But why don't you walk us through a little bit about what this means for, Boise State finally getting this invite to the Pac-12 and this new look, and what that might look like for this conference kind of going forward.
Well, obviously, it's the news that Boise State fans have been waiting for a very long time to receive. And I think there's a little bit of kind of mixed feelings. It's positive. It's all positive in the fan base. But there's levels. There's a spectrum of positivity within the fan base around this news, because this is something that Boise State fans, we've been waiting to hear for 15 years, 20 years. We've been wanting to be part of a Power 5 conference. We think we've put together a resume that deserves that. When you look at TV numbers, when you look at our wins, when you look at our national brand and the spotlight that's been on our program, we feel like we've put together the right resume. And the Pac-12 was always just too good for us. There was talks of maybe going to the Big 12, and those kind of crumbled. And so Pac-12, when it disintegrated, it just kind of seemed like, well, that was that. And I will say, honestly, up front, and I discussed the conference realignment discussion. I was not predicting that Boise State would be ending up in a conference with the Pac-12 name. That was not on my bingo card. It was something that obviously, was a possibility, and I did discuss it, but I always listed it as the least likely scenario. I honestly thought that Oregon State and Washington State would join the Mountain West. So I did not see this coming. And to get this opportunity to go join the Pac-12 is exciting because it's new. Newness is always exciting. And the teams that they're bringing over, most of them, besides Colorado State, most of them are of the top teams in the Mountain West. And so you have an opportunity to build something new here. But I think that, again, that mixed spectrum of excitement, because while everybody's excited about it, some people, I think, are looking at this as a big step up. And they're going, oh, man, we're part of the Pac-12. They think that there's a possibility maybe we gain autonomous 5 status. And they're so excited about that potentiality. While others, and I think I fall more into this category, we see this as not exactly a lateral move, but not a huge step up. It's kind of a small step up. I think there are big positives, and the positive outcome of this move, I think, will depend on a lot on who the Pac-12 adds next, which we'll talk about here in this video. But for Boise State, this is a good opportunity. This is the right move. I did have my my skepticism at the beginning, especially when you start looking at the buyouts and joining a conference that's not actually a conference yet. They still have to add at least 2 teams. They have to get to 8 to actually be a conference, and who knows with their TV deal. And there's a lot of uncertainty out there that Boise State's kind of stepping off into the air here. But at the end of the day, I do think this is a good move, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But I think that this is a good move for Boise State. I think it's going to give them an opportunity to have a clearer path to the playoffs as one of the top group, at least group of 6 conferences. And I think this will give an opportunity to have a little bit of a higher national light on what Boise State does, playing the better teams and getting rid of some of the lower chaff of the Mountain West that they had been part of before. So overall, I think this is a positive move, though I'm not going to say that I think that every element is 100% awesome. I think that there are some drawbacks, but overall it's a good move.
Yeah. So first, you mentioned that you're always spurned by the Pac-12 in the past. That they felt like they're too good for you. Well, BYU fans can relate, so we're with you there. And instead, BYU and Boise State had a very fun rivalry that lasted throughout BYU's independence era. Perhaps as it kind of looked like with BYU going to the Big 12, that might not, we may not play each other for the foreseeable future. Now, as a member of the Pac-12, maybe that changes things. I don't know. Maybe we see each other again, maybe not. But honestly, the incentive isn't there to go play a really competitive team out of conference. Although it's not. But it's always good when you can play those rivalries. But anyway, so going back to the Pac-12, so they're taking Boise, along with Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, Colorado State, which were all schools that were mentioned in the realignment talks, all schools that back in 2016 were in consideration for Big 12 that first time when it was that whole dog and pony show and they didn't expand. All teams talked about as kind of the next schools if the Big 12 were to expand further before the Four Corner schools got involved. Those were all schools that were really mentioned in that. And then as well with the Pac-12 once USC and UCLA announced they were leaving to the Big Ten. So, that it really is kind of the cream of the crop. So do you think though, so this is obviously putting the Mountain West in kind of a precarious situation, losing some of these top schools from its conference. Do you think that this is at all a way to try to, hey, we're taking, in terms of the perspective from the Pac-2, hey, let's get these best schools in and maybe we can bring the Mountain West to the negotiating table to kind of change the terms? Because as it were, the Mountain West said, hey, you guys don't bring enough value to us. If we bring you guys to the Mountain West, and looked like they were getting a raw deal because it really looked like that's the way it was going, right? And then ultimately now they did something which none of us really expected them to, which was to poach the Mountain West because of, as you mentioned, the expense. And I can't remember, it's close to like 30 million per school, right?
Well, so the total right now between the 4 schools, it's 17 million per school because it's 2 years out. So if it was inside of 2 years, then it would be 34 million. But since it's 2026, it's 17 million. But then on top of that, you also have a poaching a fee because they had the conference alliance. So anytime that you hear the word alliance, it just basically means we're going to pillage your conference in a couple of years. It's happened every time. So if that ever gets thrown around, you need to run for the hills and arm up. So they had the conference alliance to allow Oregon State and Washington State to schedule Mountain West teams and to fill out their non-conference schedule. So they're going to have to pay a poaching fee per school, and that's somewhere in the sum of 40+ million. So for 4 schools, it's going to cost them $111 million. Now, again, whether that is, some of that is the schools will have to pay that themselves for the exit fee. Some of that's the Pac-12. But out of this, the Mountain West is going to be $111 million richer.
Wow. And so do you think that it all brings the Mountain West and, hey, you know what, let's negotiate after all? Or do you think that bridge is burned and that, they're just looking for the future?
Well, again, like you said, this was completely out of the blue. And it was reported that when the Mountain West, earlier on this last year over their media cycles, that the Mountain West had shut the door on Oregon State and Washington State, that they'd said, like, yeah, we're not really that interested in you. I think if Oregon State and Washington State had seriously applied, Mountain West would have accepted them. But I mean, Gloria Navarez, she's a great conference commissioner, and she was playing hardball. Yeah. She was playing hardball. She'd done a good job of holding the conference together so far. And
how was she did at San Diego State?
Yeah. She brought San Diego State back in, made them pay, pay and everything. So, yeah, this was a move that nobody saw coming. And what I think has happened here is that the Pac-12, in this very surprising coup, has set themselves up in a really, really good place right now because the Mountain West is down to 8 teams. So they are right at the minimum of teams necessary. And the AAC, who thinks that maybe some of their members may be taken, is now coming after Air Force hard, trying to get Air Force to come join Army and Navy in the American Athletic Conference. So I think there's a very strong possibility that could actually happen. And so the Mountain West, the remaining teams are in a spot of desperation right now. I don't think they have any other choice but to come to the negotiating table. The conference itself, will they? I don't know. But I could see the remaining teams, if given an option, could potentially accept, lower TV money or something like that. I mean, the Pac-12 holds all the cards. And what I think they did here, because a lot of people are saying, if it's being reported, it's being reported. And if this is the case that the Pac-12 wants to go back into the Mountain West, well, then why didn't they just bring in all the teams they want to right off the bat, right? And I think what the Pac-12 has done is brilliant right now because they have taken the 4 best teams. They've completely destabilized Mountain West. Mountain West, the best teams left in that conference are, UNLV, Air Force in most years. This year not very good, but UNLV, Air Force, and like Utah State is kind of a wild card, but I mean that's it. Like as far as teams that bring something to the table in the realm of realignment, it's a tough spot for them. And so the Pac-12 is done right now is brilliant because they have an opportunity of kind of 3-tiered realignment. They can go out and try and see if they can get back some former members. It was reported, it was reported to me that Cal and Stanford may be interested. I'm not sure how legitimate that is. My gut is telling me that's probably not going to happen, but they at least have that opportunity. They can go and say, hey, we've got 6 teams. Would you guys want to be 2 more? The travel costs are killing you right now. I know Cal's doing okay in the ACC, but like those schools, they're not massive football schools. Like they don't have that. They're not like UCLA and USC and like actually really care about their football programs. And so, come back and play in a regional conference and maybe we can get that autonomous spot back and you'll have everything you had before. So they have that chance. And if those teams say no, then they go to the next step. They can go out and say, okay, we're going to get the best of the rest. We're going to go out and take some AAC schools. I won't name names later because I know it's a component of the video, but they can go do that. And then if that falls through and doesn't become an option, then they can go back to the Mountain West, which will always be there. Those schools are going. This is now that what is left of the Mountain West, it is a clear step up to the Pac-12. What was previously the Mountain West, I think the previous Mountain West compared to this new Pac-12 were close. I think new Pac-12 is a little bit higher, but overall, like this what's left of the Mountain West, completely unstable. They're looking at being the 3rd worst Group of 5 conference right now, and so they can always go back to the Mountain West and they can take whoever they want to, and they will come. And so I think that it's a brilliant move right now by the Pac-12, and they've set themselves up to do really whatever they want to.
Do you think, or is there any truth to? I've seen some things float around on Twitter that the Pac-12 wants to avoid getting sued if they take too many members and essentially destroy the Mountain West, take them below 8, that they could leave themselves open for a lawsuit in that regard. And that's why they only took 4 as opposed to more schools from there. Or is there any truth to that? Or is that just Twitter garbage?
I'm not a lawyer. I can't speak to whether or not that's true of what the legal ramifications would be for that. I mean, the Big Ten didn't get successfully sued, or I don't think they got sued after they destroyed the Pac-12. And so I don't think so. I don't think inside of their contract that they had with the Mountain West and the Pac-12 for the scheduling agreement. I have looked over it. I did not see, and maybe I missed it, but I didn't see anything in there that said anything about opening themselves up to legal ramifications if the conference gets destroyed. It did say that the penalty for taking Mountain West teams increases with each one that you take. Oh. And so the more teams that you take, the first team's a certain fee and the second's and it grows and grows and grows. Now what could happen here potentially, depending on how many teams that they take, one option for the Pac-12 to avoid having to pay any fees at all, and I don't know if it's the one they'd want to take, but if they take, I believe it's 9 out of the 12 Mountain West schools, it dissolves the conference and they don't have to pay any fees at all. Right. So I'm not going to say I know for certainty whether or not it would impact that. Based on my analysis, what I've read, the sources, the notable sources that have spoken on this issue, I don't think that's a ramification. I think it's the other things. I think it's the Pac-12 putting themselves in a good bargaining position now. Because if you take all the Mountain West schools you want at the beginning, they all have the same deal. Now you can come back after looking through all your best options, go to the Mountain West and say, okay, we'll take you and we'll take you, but wait a second, we're going to take you with these costs. And those schools will say, okay, fine, like we don't have a choice. So I think that's more along the lines of why they didn't go get everybody at first. It puts them in a great spot to do whatever they want to and be in a good position at the end of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, what Oregon State and Washington State have done is masterful. I mean, it seems so easy and right there in front of us, but I mean, the Mountain West held all the cards because we know that those Pac-2 were having conversations with everybody. They were trying, agreements with Big 12. They were trying, ACC. They were trying the AAC. They were trying the Mountain West, and there just weren't a lot of options. The Mountain West made the most sense, and even them, they were playing hardball with them. And now with this move and being willing to fork up that money, and which is, they've got that war chest from the Pac-12, they're the two remaining. They get that money, as I think is fair. And if that's how they choose to use it, that just, I mean, ultimately, like you said, the two conferences, this new version of the Pac-12 versus what's currently, what we see this season, the Mountain West, not that far apart, but just that power play and that dynamic, and it shifts them back into the driver's seat. And I think that was masterful. And so, how do you think this works or this is going to play out in terms of financial opportunities for the conference in terms of TV contract and whatnot with this conference and with potentially whoever else you add? Because right now, I mean, you do have some good markets, but it also, I guess, depends on how big the conference gets in terms of, having the amount of inventory to sell to to TV partners. And so do you have a sense of anything that you've read or seen out there of what kind of money that this conference feels like it's going to be able to get?
Yeah, and to speak to that as well, before I kind of throw out some of these numbers, the Mountain West was in a really stable position here before all of this happened. But I think one of the reasons that this might have happened is that there's an idea now that when you remove the bottom feeders of the Mountain West and you take these top teams, you can go out and get more money per school on the value of the teams that you've brought in without having any kind of anchors that aren't contributing as much. And so I do think that the potential, both conferences were up to renegotiate their TV contracts in 2026, same year for both of them. And so I think that is a big play in this. Right now, the Mountain West schools are only making $5 million per school. It's not very much. And again, that's because you're spreading it through so many schools. And while, right now their deal is with CBS and Fox, and I hate it. But part of the reason that money is coming in the first place is because of these top teams. Those networks are not playing to watch New Mexico play. They're not playing to watch Nevada play. They're not paying to watch San Jose State play. Like those are not bringing in the TV numbers. They're paying because of Boise State primarily. Boise State actually has its own TV contract that they are allowed to negotiate as part of their deal coming back to the conference at the Big East. So Boise State actually gets an additional 1.8 million on top of every other school. So primarily it's because of Boise State. But then after that, it's because of Fresno State. They've done some really good things. They've always been a competitive program the last 20 years. You had all the Carr brothers that went through there. That's been a strong program. It's because San Diego State, they're a little bit of a better team out there as far as the market discussion goes. I don't like focusing on markets, but San Diego State's had some good seasons, and Rocky Long's done some good stuff with that program in the past to elevate them to where they are today. Different head coach now, obviously. And so they're paying for those top schools, but then the rest of the schools, you're not getting as much money because they're only paying for those big ones. So you're not going to get this huge contract. And then you have to share it with everybody else who didn't bring any value to the table in the first place. So now you have an opportunity to come here to the new Pac-12 and to say, hey, we're the reason you were paying money in the first place. We're bringing in some newer faces that are also worth money. And everybody is getting a proportional distribution to the value that they actually bring. Every new person is actually, besides maybe Colorado State, but every new person is actually bringing value to the table. And so I've seen the numbers thrown out there that you would want to see probably at least 10 million per school, and they think that they can get that. Obviously, looking at former Pac-12 teams, you're looking at 20 million type of thing. I don't think that's on the table, but from what I have read, I think that's somewhere in the range to 10 to 15 million, especially when you compare that to, I think the AAC schools get like 7 million a piece or something like that. And I may be wrong. I may be wrong that number, but it's not, it's not huge. So, you obviously you want to be the best paid and you want to be able to attract teams to the other conferences. And so it's looking like they may be able to get somewhere between the range of 10 and 20 million. And if that's the case, if the TV contract does end up being that lucrative, this would be a fantastic move for Boise State, these other teams. This would take my skepticism and completely just do away with it, because right now, again, you're doubling, potentially tripling your money. You can pay your buyout in 2 years. And there was even reports that the Pac-12 was going to actually assist in that buyout in the first place. So long term, the TV money is what is going to make this move truly beneficial. And I think there's a really strong possibility out there.
So I guess I should have led with this question, but how do you feel about this move? It sounds like you're very positive about it.
Yeah, like I said, there are drawbacks to it. The uncertainty, the fact that you're joining a conference with Oregon State and Washington State, and this is not necessarily because of my feelings towards those institutions, though Boise State fans are starting to develop a distaste for Oregon State. But those two teams have a foot out the door. They always have. And if the ACC collapses in a couple of years, or this year or next year, or whenever this court case gets decided, and Florida State and Clemson get the opportunity to leave to wherever they want to go, if anybody still wants Florida State, and the ACC comes calling, the Oregon State and Washington State will take that in a heartbeat. They're not going to have any loyalty to this conference. They're going to be gone in a second. And so you're going to be left holding the bag with your 4 teams and then whoever else joined. And it's a tough spot. I mean, now you've lost Oregon State and Washington State in their markets, and it puts your TV deal in jeopardy. And so there's that uncertainty. Then obviously there's the buyouts and Boise State losing their special designator, which again, if the TV money is as much as has been discussed, it won't matter. They'll make more than what they are making right now anyway. But there's that uncertainty. And then there's the bowl games. I mean, right now the Pac-12 has good bowl game alignments, and they just decided to keep all of the current and former Pac-12 teams aligned with their bowls for now through 2026 or through 2025. But starting 2026, that all becomes another discussion. And so for me, I think you have to make this move. Why did this happen? I don't think this happened because Boise State was like, we want to get out of the Mountain West right now. I think what happened is that San Diego State and probably Colorado State, and I don't have any inside sources on this, just based on the attitudes of the two schools and what they've done in the past. I think San Diego State and Colorado State got an offer from the Pac-12, and they accepted. Because, again, San Diego State's been looking to get out of this conference for a while. Colorado State was probably just absolutely shocked that they got an invite and was like, sure, absolutely, you want us? Before you change your mind, yes. And at that point, you have to go. Like, if those two teams are jumping ship and now you're left, and Fresno State probably came along, Boise State was looking at it. I mean, Jeremiah Dickey, he said that when the news broke, he did not expect to be having the conversation on, because I think it was on Wednesday. He said when this broke on Wednesday, he was not anticipating that he would be in interviews on Thursday talking about being in the Pac-12. Like, it accelerated within 48 hours. So somebody jumped. Somebody or two teams jumped, and the rest of the teams were left saying, we have to go. So I am saying this is the right move. Absolutely, this is the right move for Boise State. Is it better than just incorporating Oregon State and Washington State into what was the Mountain West in the first place? That will depend on who they add. But I am positive about this, and if the TV money ends up being as big as people have talked about it, this will be an incredible move that will elevate the level of all programs that have joined.
Awesome. Okay, so you mentioned it, and you've alluded to it several times. We're over 20 minutes into this. Let's talk about potential candidates, because we know that the Pac-12 needs to expand to at least 8 teams in order to qualify as an FBS conference. And I don't know. I know I don't know if you know, but in terms of being able to have a conference championship game, do they need to hit the threshold of 10 schools? Because I remember when the Big 12 got, lobbied to have it removed, because before you used to have to have 12 teams in 2 divisions in order to hold a conference championship game. The Big 12, to BYU's dismay, was able to get that rule changed, and they were able to still have a conference championship game with 10 conference members. But I don't know if that applies even if you're down to as few as 8 schools, or if that's another incentive for the Pac-12 to continue growing.
Well, so I will say that obviously they need a minimum of 8. What has been discussed based on the conversations with mostly Oregon State and Washington State's admin teams is that they are targeting 9 as an ideal number, but I think that recent reporting has indicated they might go, 10 at least. You're not going to see them just go add like, up to 14 teams. So this is going to be a little bit of a smaller ad. So I will say, as far as numbers being thrown out, 8 is the minimum, but 9 to 10 has been discussed. I'm going to say I'm not. I'm going to say I wasn't necessarily completely prepared to answer that question there. I
I'm
haven't done
sorry.
the
I
research
feel
right
that.
now. No, you're tough. I'm not saying you did anything wrong there. I'm just saying, as far as answering this question, I believe, based on just trying to remember here what has been discussed in the last couple of years, that the NCAA got rid of the requirement to have divisions to be able to have and the number requirement. That is what I. That's what I'm remembering right now. I could be completely off base, so don't take my word on that. I'm not sure.
No, I won't hold you to it. So, having said all that, and I'll even throw up a map here because we're talking about it. So this is how the conference is currently constituted. It makes sense, pretty regional. Only Colorado State's a little bit out there, but still very regional. How would you like to see the Pac-12, or who would you like to see them go after, and how big would you like to see it get? How would you like all of this to kind of take shape?
All right, well, I'm going to give you what I have heard, what's being reported out there. So, what I think is going to happen, and I'll also give you what I want. So, I'll start off with what I want. What I want to see out of this conference is I want to see a best of the rest. I would love to see a West Coast and East Coast division where you have mostly the Mountain West schools that were showed right there, and then best of the East Coast popping up. So, you're talking, Memphis, Tulane. I'd love for them to go out and also, not necessarily East Coast here, but could kind of share the gap of bridging the conference, going out and grabbing, UTSA. I think North Texas, I know they're not like doing great to start this season, but they've been putting a lot of money in to build up that conference right now. And then going out for the last 2 teams and grabbing like an App State or maybe an up and comer like JMU or, I don't know, maybe Liberty. Like I've done other videos in the past where I've discussed who other East Coast teams could be. There are good ones out there. So that's what I would like to see long term. I think that small conferences are inherently not disabled, unstable. I think small conferences are inherently unstable. If you lose 1 or 2 teams, suddenly your entire conference is in jeopardy. In addition to that, I think you reduce your footprint, your chance to be able to increase your national brand, the number of games, out of conference opportunities. I think you reduce all of that. I'm not saying you should just go add teams to add teams. You need them to be good. But I think that small conferences are inherently unstable. I think that's partially what ended up hurting the Pac-12. I think that hurt the Big 12 initially when they didn't expand. I think if they had, they could have maybe kept Texas and Oklahoma. And so you see big conferences absorbing from smaller conferences, and that's the food chain. So eventually, long term, I'd love to see that. In the immediate future, combination of what I expect and what I would love to see, sitting here at 6 teams, I would love to see them go out, grab UTSA, Memphis, Tulane, and maybe UNLV to get to 9. So that's 3 additional, so like 9 to 10 teams. That's what I'd want to see them go out and get. Now talking about what is being forecasted here, and this was being reported on. This was being reported on by. I had it written down here. Sorry, Joe Arrigio. I've never heard of him before, but he's a verified account. He's like 11,000 followers, and he does some reporting for other things. So I don't know how legitimate he is or not. But he was saying that he had sources telling him that the conference was going after UNLV, Tulane, Memphis, at San Jose State, and Rice, and not necessarily in that order. I have mixed thoughts on that. There's a couple teams in there that you heard me say. Memphis, Tulane, great additions. I want to see them in the conference. I've heard other news organizations have also thrown out, analysts have thrown that out as saying like they're hearing that the conference is going after those teams. But when you start talking about San Jose State and Rice, that would be terrible. That would just be a terrible addition there. Neither of those teams add anything. Those are kind of more traditional Pac-12 thinking, where you're going after academic schools, that are in markets that they cannot collect on because they just don't have the fan base. They don't have the winning culture. So I really hope that like maybe he's right on like 3 out of 5 there, because the other 3 I think would be good. What the reps themselves from Oregon State, from Washington State, and even from some of the teams that have come over, what they are saying and what's being reported on is that they have a heavy emphasis on regionality right now. Again, I do think eventually, long term, this conference does end up expanding to a little bit bigger. But right now, you want that stability of that regional conference and those regional rivalries. And so I think that there's a really good chance that they go after the Texas teams. That I think UTSA is a no-brainer. I think they've done the right things. I think they have the right market. They've had the right success. They're building in the right direction. So I think that as far as what is being predicted, and not necessarily what I want, I think you could see the conference go after North Texas, Memphis, and then go back to UNLV. There are some issues with UNLV. UNLV was rejected initially, at least from what's being reported, because there's actually the organization that controls the state organization that controls the academic boards for UNLV and Nevada. Apparently, there's some kind of rule that those teams have to be in the same conference together. And I know they've been in separate conferences before, but they have that apparently was a stoppage to UNLV being added initially, because if they added UNLV, they'd have to add Nevada, and you just don't want Reno. There's nothing there. I mean, I know Jeff Choate is doing some good stuff to rebuild that program, and they've had good moments. They've had the Kaepernick days and that kind of thing, but their fans are terrible. Their facilities are terrible. The footprint is terrible. They don't get the viewership numbers, and so that's a real anchor. So that would have to be worked out. But if it can get worked out, I think based on what we are seeing reported, I think you could see UNLV and then potentially Memphis and UTSA would probably be my predicted teams, unless those teams weren't interested and then they had to just dip back and grab Mountain West schools.
Yeah, I just want to touch on that real quick. I pulled this back up. We didn't coordinate ahead of time at all. And so when I put these up here, first of all, these were just, where'd it go here? Several that I've heard mentioned a lot. You mentioned some of these. You didn't really mention USF, but and I know this is an odd number too. But I just threw up some that were commonly mentioned. I did think about putting UNLV on there, and perhaps I should have. But yeah, so it's very interesting. I mean, there's really no surprise with these guys. I mean, these were also mentioned in potential Big 12 expansion candidates again prior to the Four Corner schools. But it's amazing that these two. I mean, I think a few years ago, I wouldn't have even been able to tell you the colors or mascot or anything of either one of these two schools. And now look at them, and they've kind of, done the right things and been able to peak with their programs, at the right time, especially UTSA, to see their ascension, getting to the American and being in position to even be a candidate, even be in the conversation as a potential expansion candidates for the Pac-12 now is pretty wild. So good for them. But yeah, so you threw some schools. Is there is there a specific number that you'd like to see the conference hit? Because like for me, I think like the perfect number for a conference in theory, not necessarily this Pac-12, but just in general, would be 10 teams in a conference, because you can play 9 conference games, 3 out of conference games. It's great for basketball. It gives you 18 in conference basketball games, home and away with everybody. I just think it's a great number when you look at it. But again, I know there's other things like you mentioned, you only want brands that are going to bring value, so you don't have anyone weighing you down. But you also have to think about, as you mentioned, small conferences seem more unstable. You lose one school and all of a sudden, it creates havoc. But also, just in terms of scheduling, if you're only at 8, that only gives you 7 conference games. That means you have to fill out the rest of that schedule, which could be difficult, especially as these other conferences are getting bigger and bigger and have fewer and fewer out of conference games that they have to schedule. So I don't know, is there, out of all that, aside from who the candidates are, is there an ideal number you'd like to see the Pac-12 hit?
Yeah, I think that an ideal number here for the Pac-12 would be 12 to 14 teams. I think that having the divisional format is good. I think that it builds good rivalries inside of those divisional formats. I think it gives you that stability. If somebody leaves, you're still strong. If you're at 14 teams, you lose 2, you still got your divisions. If you're at 14 teams, you lose 4. I mean, well, you're still at 10. I mean, you look at the American Athletic Conference right now. American Athletic Conference is at 14 teams. They have a really strong possibility here of losing 2 to 4 of their teams and being completely fine. They lose 2 to 4 of their programs, they are still one of the strongest out there. Group of 5 programs, and they're definitely better than Conference USA. They're definitely better than the MAC. They're in competition with the Sun Belt. They're, and they just go add the right programs back. I mean, they get paid for 4 teams to leave. They get paid that money to leave their conference, and then they use that money to turn around and buy Air Force in, or go out and buy some, a couple other programs, and now they're right back at a strong schedule. You look at the Mountain West, 12 teams. They've lost 4 and they're on the brink of extinction. So especially when you have a conference that is the best of the rest, and the conference realignment and expansion is always happening, and it's always a discussion point. It's never going to go away, and it's never going to get to a point where it is just, unless we go to like a 2 divisional format, it's not going to get to a point where you are completely safe from poaching forever. And if you do have a best of the rest, but you're on that gray area between Power 4 and Group of 6, your conference is going to be the first looked at if something happens to the feeding chain. If the Big Ten or SEC decides, hey, we want a couple more teams, and they go take the Big 12 or the AAC, they're going to come out and get you. And so I think you, especially, again, when you have 2 teams that have been sending their resumes to every single commissioner that will return their phone calls in Oregon State and Washington State, that you need to have teams be able to survive any kind of realignment. And so ideally, format-wise, I think 12 to 14 teams is probably where you want to go. What I'm thinking, though, is probably this ends up being 9 to 10. I think initially they go out and grab a few more teams. But for me, personally, 12 to 14, that's what I think puts you in a position to have the best reach, the best competitiveness, and also the best survival chance for future realignment.
Do you think, because as you mentioned, what the Pac-12 right now is doing, because the best of the rest used to be the Mountain West, then the Big East became the American, and they kind of went back and forth, but ultimately it seemed like they kind of wrestled that. Some of that was more better publicity than the Mountain West, and so it was a perception thing, but they kind of wrestled that away. Then they got kind of decimated. I'd argue that they're pretty even, although the Mountain West probably has some higher end product there, but pretty close. Pac-12 definitely seems like that is the goal now. That is where they are going to live, which is kind of the best case scenario at this point until the next wave of realignment, as you mentioned. But the American, do you think that them, because as you mentioned earlier too, there's real talks about them going after Air Force now, which would only further destabilize the Mountain West, but also it would be great in a lot of ways that it would get the 3 military academies in the same conference, which is really cool. But do you think that changes the calculus for the schools that are in the American at all that might be thinking about potentially going to the Pac-12?
No, I don't think adding Air Force makes you go, oh, this is definitely a conference that I want to stay at. I think the reason that the AAC is targeting Air Force, and Ross Dellinger, the same person who actually reported all this Pac-12 realignment happening in the first place, has also reported as of today, it's today, that Air Force is being targeted heavily by the AAC, and that they're having discussions with the athletic department there for Air Force. So, no, I don't think that adding Air Force, going to 15 teams in your conference makes you think that, okay, we're good to stay. I think this is a insurance move. I think the AAC sees the Sharks circling. Yeah, there's vulnerability in the Mountain West. They've wanted Air Force for a while. They may just be doing it. They may be completely stable, and they just want to add Air Force anyway. But I think more than anything, they see the writing on the wall. They see the likelihood that they're going to lose at least 2 teams, again, probably like a UTSA or Memphis. I know that they've wanted to stay. A lot of people have talked about staying west of the Mississippi, but I think Memphis just offers you too much. So, Rice has been talked about as a candidate, like we said, North Texas. I mean, most of their schools are being talked about as candidates. I think the likelihood is they lose at least 2. So you go out and get Air Force, you stay strong, you have the Commanders in Chiefs trophy. Air Force has been talked about as an expansion candidate potentially for the Pac-12. I know I had Ron Counts on the other day, formerly of the Idaho Statesman, now with Hero Sports, and he was saying that he really thinks Air Force is going to go over there. I don't think they will. I have heard that they actually have some debt issues that they're dealing with right now, and so any kind of buyout would have to be paid for by the conference that they're joining, and I don't expect the Pac-12 to do that for Air Force. Then you also have the additional factor that Air Force is a military institution. Their employees are GS employees, so anything that any funding, any financial decisions has to get approved by the military chain and ultimately, commander in chief in Congress. And so it's a deeper political thing. And I don't think that you see those higher political entities approving what is essentially, in a lot of ways, it's not a step up to a Power Four. It's still a Group of Six conference to go over to the Pac-12. But I could see them approving going to the ACC. AAC, American Athletic. So
Yeah.
no, I don't see that being something that would keep those schools. In fact, if anything, I see that as an indicator that they are likely to lose a couple of teams here in the near future.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on that. So, do you think that there's any kind of, and now I think we're completely in speculation, even more so than we have been, but do you think there's any sort of chance that the AAC and the Mountain West come together to work out some sort of agreement and try to make each other stronger, because both are susceptible to further poaching?
Yeah, I have seen a lot of that, actually. I have seen a lot of people, nothing official, but I think that has been something that people have been talking about for a while. I know Big 12 Mafia went on his show and he was like, hey, this would be great, but to combine the Big 12 and the American Athletic Conference. And so I think that this would be something that would be looked at. Gloria Navarro is again, very, very strong, smart commissioner, and she is going to do what is best for the survival of that conference. I think that the Mountain West would potentially look to add teams before they did that. That would be a last case resort. I don't think they're just going to give up their conference status to go join the American Athletic Conference. And they're never going to agree to another alliance of any form. It would have to be a complete joining if that was. But say American Athletic Conference loses 4 teams, as has been potentially predicted that they could. They lose 4 teams. They're down to 10. The Mountain West is sitting there at 8. And maybe they lose another team, I don't know. So now you combine those and you have an 18-team conference. Maybe that happens. What I think is more likely for the Mountain West is that Gloria Navarro is going to go and look at who they can bring up. I think that there's candidates in Conference USA. I think there's candidates within the FCS ranks. I think that is probably the most likely first case scenario. But at the end of the day, nothing's off the table here in conference realignment, and that could potentially happen.
So I don't have any load in here. Let me take a stab at it. When you say Conference USA, you're talking about the UTEPs and the New Mexico State, which would make sense in a lot of ways. I don't know. I mean, it would bring stability and it would get you down technically into Texas and some regional rivals. And I know there's been history between like Wyoming and UTEP, for example, going way back. FCS schools, common ones that are being thrown around, and let me know if there's any others, but the Montana and Montana State, as well as all of the Dakotas, primarily North Dakota State and South Dakota State, yeah. the other SDSU. I don't know. Do you know if they have any interest in moving up to the FBS ranks, and if that is something that they would even entertain at this point?
North Dakota State definitely does. North Dakota State has expressed interest both casually through their fan base, but also through rumors within the admin team. North Dakota State has definitely expressed interest of moving up. North Dakota State is ready for the move up. They kind of see the writing on the wall where FCS is going. All the best teams are leaving, and so those teams are definitely ready. They have the financial pockets to be able to. That's another thing with the FCS. New change to the NCAA. If you're going to move up to FBS, you have to pay a $5 million entrance fee. And that was just put in place to kind of stop conferences from just adding anybody, like the Kennesaw States and all these other teams that Conference USA is bringing in. That conference sucks so much. But you kind of put it like a cap to say, okay, in addition to all the other requirements, you got to show you have money to actually add to the FBS. We're not just going to, FBS isn't just going to become FCS. But South Dakota State, North Dakota State, they have that money, that potential to do that. And Montana is a little more questionable whether or not they have the financial resources to, but maybe they could. And maybe I think that'd be a potential.
But as we mentioned, the Mountain West is about to get a windfall of money, right? From those schools that are leaving. So potentially they could even help move that along if they felt like it would help stabilize.
And I'm not sure again on the legality if the NCAA if they can get assistance from I don't know. I have no idea if it's like a separation fee from a conference. I think again part of that is to prove that you have the financial means. So I don't know if you can get like an anonymous donation from the Mountain West. I don't know the specifics of that. But yes, I think when you're looking at the Mountain West, Gloria Navarro, again, she's a great commissioner and she's going to do what needs to happen for this conference to survive. I think first off, Conference USA, those teams, UTEP, New Mexico State, the teams you mentioned, that they make sense. New Mexico State and UTEP have a history in basketball. They haven't been very good lately, but they have a history in basketball. They're regional programs. They wouldn't elevate the level of the Mountain West, but they would at least bring some stability. And no one else wants those teams. No one else is coming after those teams. And so you add those teams, you're going to bring stability because they're going to be in your conference forever. But I think the best move is to go out and get the FCS schools. I think that the Montanas are incredible regional programs. They make perfect sense for the Mountain West. They have good football programs, and they have a pretty good history of basketball between the two of them. I think it's Montana State. I mixed them up a little bit, but Montana State has been to the NCAA tournament the last 3 years, and Montana, not the last few years, has been very good, but has historically been very, very good at basketball. So those are strong, and Mountain West has always been a good basketball conference. And then San Diego State and did it myself. South Dakota State and North Dakota State, you saw those two teams almost take down Power 4 programs. South Dakota State almost beat Oklahoma State, really, really close. North Dakota State almost beat Colorado, which I don't know how good that is, but they almost beat a Power 4 team with a lot of hype around them. And so those two programs consistently are at the top of the FCS. I think they could join the Mountain West and elevate the level of that conference. I think both of those teams could join the Mountain West and compete immediately, especially this version of the Mountain West, day one for a conference championship. And so, you're not going to replace what you had. You're not going to replace Boise State, San Diego State, Fresno State, and Colorado State. But I think you can add the right teams that keep this a regionally strong conference and also at the same time maintain your conference standing, the stability, and keep you within the running to be the third or fourth best group of 5 program out there behind the new Pac-12 and a rotating basis of the American and Sun Belt. I think those would be really, really good additions.
Yeah. One last one I'll throw out there, which really could make a lot of sense for either the Pac-12 or the Mountain West, is who I imagine is your favorite FCS school, former FBS member, the Idaho Vandals. They used to be in the conference, the precursor to the Pac, I guess 8 and then 10, 12. And they've been in the conference with San Jose State, Nevada, all these other guys. And I don't know. Is there any chance that the Vandals could be in the running for the Mountain West?
So I'm going to say I've heard a lot of people mention the FCS teams that I mentioned with varying degrees of I don't think the Mountain West is at a point right now where they are actually going out pursuing those teams, so there hasn't been anything officially reported, but a lot of other people have mentioned those. I haven't heard anybody seriously mentioning Idaho or Eastern Washington or teams like that. Idaho, not a program for the Pac-12. Let's just put that to rest. That's not going to happen. For the Mountain West,
did you beat Wyoming?
Yeah, but that's not exactly a huge selling point right now. This Wyoming team is not very good, as BYU should know. They didn't have much difficulty against them. So this is as far as adding Idaho, this is a team that voluntarily went back down to the FCS because they couldn't compete and because it just wasn't financially viable. And so I don't, and they were playing in a terrible conference too. They were playing in, I believe it was Conference USA before they went down.
It was the WAC, and then they went to the Sun Belt.
Sun Belt, yeah. And Sun Belt wasn't the Sun Belt that they are today. It was just bad. And again, they had all the travel fees, but they voluntarily went down to the FCS because they couldn't compete, and they're having success there. They're having excitement. The program's growing. The program's building. I don't think you necessarily just abandon that. I don't know if they're in a position to want to come back up, and even if you do you come back up and join the Mountain West that is left, that is there? I don't know if they see that as something that they want to do. I haven't heard anybody seriously discuss them. I know that they're a good program. They played Oregon close. They beat Wyoming. They are on the rise, and I hate to say that about Idaho ever. But I don't think that's where your first look is. I think your first look is not to a program that was in the group of 5 and then went down to the FCS and hasn't been on this sustained slope of success. I think you look at programs like Montana State that have been around since the 1800s, and you look at the North Dakota and South Dakota states that are at a strong level of competition right now versus an Idaho team that's been good the last few years but showed no sustainable success over its history in the FBS the last 30 years.
Okay, so don't have to plan any trips to the Kibbie Dome anytime soon.
No,
Okay,
can't wait.
so I mean, I was mostly kidding, although there is a lot of history there for them, and I wanted to get your gut with that a little bit, but um, no, yeah, it probably makes a lot of sense for them to stay where they're at, and especially going into a precarious situation as what is the Mountain West as it stands right now. But anyway. We have gone way over what we had talked about going, and so I really apologize. This is a very interesting topic for me, so I appreciate all your time and sharing that. And please remind everybody where they can find you and all your content.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, Bronco Bleymair, it's right there. YouTube is my main platform. I also have a Twitter. I tend to have a little bit more fun on my Twitter. I will post serious stuff out there, but I'd say it's like 30% honest, true analysis and like 70% just messing around with other fan bases. So, if you see me joking around on Twitter, don't necessarily take that as what I actually believe. I will always be honest and upfront on my YouTube and try to back up what I'm saying with sources. I know today has been a lot of conjecture and prediction because we just don't know right now. I mean, there's just so much out there. You can report on some things that have been said. You can have some sources that say something to you, but at the end of the day, nobody really knows exactly what the next move is going to be. And so I enjoyed this conversation. It's great. This is a really fun topic, like you said, to talk about. And it's a topic that I'm going to continue to discuss on my channel. So make sure you go out and look up at Bronco Bleymeir. It's not just all Boise State stuff. It is a heavy dose of it. But we talk conference realignment all the time. And this is, again, a subject that's continuing to change and continuing to move, and I will continue to have videos coming out on it. So again, thanks so much for having me on. Thanks so much for having this discussion. Let me know when we're done, because I have something I like to say right at the end, but I've said it earlier a couple of times on other videos, so I don't want to do that right now. But
Go for it.
Thanks
Well,
thanks.
I'll just say, yeah, be sure to like the video, subscribe, please, and do go check out Bronco Bleymeir and all his content. He really does do great analysis, and it gets former players. You've had Jeremiah Dickey, you've had others on in interviews, so great interviews, great content. So do go check him out. Go ahead.
Like I said, thanks so much, everybody, for sticking around for this whole conversation. Make sure that you like and subscribe to Saturday Warriors channel. He does great stuff, and it's been great to see his rise here, and you want to be part of that. So again, thanks so much for having me on. Thanks, everybody, for being all the way through to the end. I'll jump in the comments afterwards and see what everyone's saying and have that discussion with you. So throw your own thoughts below on our topic and who you might see coming up in the Pac-12. So thanks so much for having me on, and as I end every video that I'm a part of, go Big Blue!
All right, go Cougs.